we've been the other thing I should stress, right, is, I always say to anyone who asks me whether I like my job that it's the best job in the world. I could say that unequivocally every day of my life, and the thing that makes it the best job in the world is the absolutely phenomenal students and postdocs, both graduate and undergraduate research fellows that we're surrounded with. And they are unequivocally some of the brightest, most passionate people I've ever encountered in my entire life. And they make doing what we do all the more enjoyable and all the more exciting. I think everyone who comes to MIT recognizes in some subconscious level that they have the opportunity in this environment to be able to invent the future. Invent the future in terms of the technology that they develop, invent the future in terms of the type of environment that they want to see in the future. And that is not only a huge motivator for students, it's also what allows them, I think, to be oftentimes the most creative individuals they can be. And so I'm inspired every day by seeing interacting with people that have a motivation and an enthusiasm and a spirit that makes you really believe in the best possibilities that we have for the future. So that's what makes being an MIT professor unequivocally one of the best jobs in the world. Well, we have some projects that we think in the future can be this is what I would say. I think one of the things that we face at MIT, and certainly our group does, is that because we like to pick the high risk, high reward projects, we are always cognizant, one, of the fact that if you're really doing that, some significant fraction of those are not going to pan out. And that's totally okay. That's not only okay, it's healthy. If you were only picking those challenges and those problems that would lead with very, very high success rate to something that is going to be a deployable technology, I think we would be not really utilizing the enormous creative talent that we have from our students and the enormous power that we have in terms of the enterprise and the ecosystem that MIT offers. Instead, what we're really driven by is taking on those challenges that are very high risk and very high reward. One example that we're really psyched about is the prospect of someday being able to make energy conversion devices like fuel cells and electrolyzers and things in the same way that batteries are now migrating to an all solid state technology. We'd someday like to actually see electrochemical bond rearrangement reactions also occur via an all solid state technology. And we're moving in that direction, but it's still very, very early days. No one's ever done that before. At least not at the modest temperatures and pressures that we'd like to operate at. People make very high temperature, all solid state devices for electrochemical energy conversion. But we'd like to be able to do that all across the temperature and pressure space. And so that may sound a bit abstract, but we really try to think about the basic science linchpin problems that if you could get over that hurdle, it would open up an enormous wealth of possibilities. And so that is what I'm hoping and really excited about. I think that more industrial stakeholders that recognize that that's the real value proposition that MIT offers, I think the more they'll be in a position to be able to strategically think about how their own business operates 10 or 15 or 20 years down the line. One of the things we often recognize is that in the modern economy, there's a natural tendency for companies to prioritize what ultimately relates to their bottom line, quarter in, quarter out, year in, year out. And anyone who's had even the slightest bit of training in economics can really appreciate why that's necessarily at the forefront of any for-profit institution, right? And I think that researchers at MIT are fully cognizant of that. The other thing that's also been kind of known from the long arc of history and the progression of innovative companies is that that sort of approach can only lead to an institution being at the top of their game for so long. Because incumbents eventually will come up with disruptive technologies that will lead to a radically different ecosystem economically that would make a company that has a prerogative, sort of parochial approach to their development, just unable to compete. So in many ways that in research we worry about the unknown unknowns, I think that in industry they need to worry about the unknown unknowns. And the unknown unknowns, right, can only become known if you really invest in the very foundations of new industries, new economies, new technologies. And so I would say, again, this goes back to the principle of MIT really being a knowledge house. I cannot guarantee that every time I engage with an industrial stakeholder that I will be able to produce for them a technology that will affect their bottom line 5 years from now. What I can guarantee for every industrial stakeholder that I interact with is that what they will take from that, the knowledge they'll gain from that interaction, will allow them to be better positioned to make strategic investment decisions in their own organization and be able to see the trends that are occurring in the future so that they can prepare for them, right? So again, we see ourselves as providing knowledge and insight just as much as we provide opportunities for transformative technology. So the ILP relationship, yeah, I can talk to that a bit. Yeah, sure. So, you know, I first learned about ILP probably my 4th or 5th day on campus when Jim Gato visited me, spoke to me about the Industrial Liaison Program, told me actually at that time, which I didn't know about, that it was, to my knowledge, one of the oldest such programs existent in the US, perhaps in the world. And that's really eye-opening to me. And that really refers a lot to what has been baked into MIT's DNA since its founding, right? We refer to MIT's motto as mind in hand, right? That we really feel that we are developing new science and new technologies because we feel ultimately that that will make an impact on society. And that can only happen by a intimate sort of interplay between the industrial stakeholders that are going to take those technologies to market and the basic scientists, technologists, and engineers that ultimately develop that new science. So I don't think that MIT has the ILP program and has had such a successful ILP program because of having an ILP program. It's because we feel that serves a larger mission at MIT in terms of making us relevant both now and in the future in terms of what the future of technology looks like. And we can only do that by having a constant interaction with industrial stakeholders. And so for me, the interaction with ILP has been enormously valuable because I'm constantly faced with what the constituencies that will ultimately be using our technology are thinking about, where their pressures are in the marketplace, and where also they see the economic and technology trends going. And we can offer our perspective in that, and we can create a dialogue that ultimately leads to, I think, a mutual sort of development cycle that would really not be possible without ILP's help and without the important role that it plays in allowing barriers to be broken down between technologists, basic scientists, and industrial stakeholders. And in my mind, some of the best interactions I've ever had with those industrial stakeholders have been all across what I would say their business is, right? So there have been times when I've had interactions through ILP with someone within a company working very much on new technology. And that's valuable because we can really compare notes and think about the technology trends and where the new science that we're doing fits into that. Equally important are those relationships that I've had that ILP has brokered where I'm talking with, for example, a CTO level person or something very high up in an organization. And there the messaging and the interaction maybe has less to do with the nitty-gritty details of the new catalyst that we're making, but really has more to do with the question of how, if we can make this, we'll totally change their business plan 20 years from now. So I think that the advantages both for companies that are interested in investing in MIT are huge, as well as they are for researchers in knowing what those companies are thinking about. So I've been enormously grateful to ILP for the work they've done in brokering this and in allowing us to have a much broader approach to our science than we would otherwise if we were sort of academically siloed, as is so often the case in the ivory tower. One of the things that we've certainly learned is that if you can figure out the basic science of how to manipulate interfaces, you actually have the ability to transform many, many different areas. And I mean, oftentimes we're actually only limited in some respects by the scope with which we can dream about those possibilities. So we focus primarily on how our technologies relate to energy cycling because that's the motivation from which I came into this. But we've developed chemistries that allow us to control the chemistry at surfaces with such degree of precision that we can now use that as a platform to tackle problems we would not have otherwise thought of doing. We could use those to make catalysts that may be really valuable for on-site delivery of new pharmaceuticals, doing chemical transformations that would otherwise not be possible because we can control the reactivity at the surface with unprecedented precision. Using that same methodology, we could think about developing next generation precise sensors for everything from contaminants in river water to biological toxins to anthrax agents. So we think that the where we've gone has been always rooted in tackling basic science questions, but as we have been successful in that so far, we've found the opportunity to then tackle problems much beyond the energy space. And those are still very, very nascent in our group, and that's especially where we find that IOP is valuable because interactions with a company can expose us to opportunities in the marketplace or even just needs that exist in the marketplace that our unique technology may really offer a solution to. We would never be exposed to that if we didn't have industrial stakeholders to explain their business needs and their business case to us.